It's just past 4 in the afternoon on Monday, May 11th, 1953, and downtown Waco, Texas is winding down its lunch crowd and easing into the late afternoon rush. The air is heavy and warm, 85 degrees, wet with humidity, rolling up off the Brazos River. On Austin Avenue, the sidewalks are full. A neon sign flickers above the Joy Theatre. Inside Chris's cafe, dishes are being cleared and coffee is being poured for the regulars settling in to read the afternoon Tribune-Herald. Across the street at the R.T. Dennis & Company furniture store, 5 stories of red brick, the largest furniture house in Central Texas, clerks are showing a young couple a new dinette set. Out at the Sears Roebuck on 25th Street, 24-year-old Lillie Matkin slips on her switchboard headset and answers the same way she always does. Sears, may I help you? Down the block, school children are heading home with satchels swinging. A bus rumbles past the 22-story Alico building, Waco's pride, the tallest skyscraper between Dallas and the Gulf. Somebody honks, somebody waves. This is ordinary life. Unremarkable, forgettable. By 4:36 this afternoon, the building Lillie Matkin sits in will fall on top of her. The brick wall of R.T. Dennis & Company will pancake onto Austin Avenue, and 114 people in this city will be dead, killed by a storm the United States government refused, by policy, to warn them about. To understand what happened in Waco that afternoon, you first have to understand what Waco believed about itself. Picture Central Texas, a wide, slow river. The Brazos River winds south from the high plains and folds itself into a long, lazy bend. On the inside of that bend sits the city, a county seat of 84,000 people, built on flat black soil, framed by low limestone hills to the west, and a rolling prairie horizon to the east. It is the buckle of the Bible Belt. It is the home of Baylor University. It is, by every metric of geography, sitting square in the deadliest tornado corridor on the planet, the spine of what meteorologists call Tornado Alley. But Waco didn't believe that. For 100 years, the city had told itself a story. The story went like this. Long before the first wagon train rolled in, the Waco, the Native American people the city was named for, had chosen this exact bend in the river because they believed the surrounding hills broke up the spring storms. The tribe, the legend went, had blessed the land. Tornadoes could not touch it, and the hills would protect Waco. It was a beautiful story. It was also a lie. Tornadoes had, in fact, struck the Waco area before. In 1881, in 1922, in 1936. But every time the city had filed it away as a freak event, realtors quoted the legend. Newspapers reprinted it. School children learned it. By 1953, the myth had hardened into civic gospel. Waco was the safest city in Texas. Storms went around it. Tornadoes feared the hills. And so on the morning of May 11th, 1953, when the Weather Bureau office in Fort Worth began watching a wall of warm Gulf air collide with a dry cold front sliding down out of the Rockies, nobody in Waco was looking at the sky. The thing forming over central Texas that afternoon was not unusual. It was, in meteorological terms, the most ordinary kind of catastrophe the Great Plains can produce. Warm and moisture-soaked air had been streaming north from the Gulf of Mexico for 5 straight days, blanketing Texas in damp 85-degree heat. From the west, a dry, cold air mass was sliding down out of New Mexico. The two collided right over central Texas, a vertical wall of unstable atmosphere stretching 40,000 feet into the sky. Inside that wall, updrafts began to spin. By 2 in the afternoon, isolated thunderstorms were popping up along the front. By 3, they were merging into a line. By 3:45, 1 cell south of the small town of Lorena had begun to rotate. What dropped out of the bottom of that cloud was a tornado that meteorologists today classify as F5, the highest rating on the Fujita scale. Winds in excess of 260 miles per hour. A funnel that, at its widest, would carve a path 1/3 of a mile across. The kind of storm that does not damage buildings. It disassembles them, brick by brick, and throws the pieces a mile down range. But this is the part the people of Waco didn't know, could not have known, because no one would tell them. That exact same afternoon, the United States Weather Bureau in Fort Worth was tracking the storm. They knew a powerful supercell had formed. They knew Central Texas was at risk. They knew, by 4 in the afternoon, that something violent was rotating just south of Waco. And they said nothing to the public. Not because they didn't have a phone, not because they didn't have a radio, but because the Weather Bureau, by official policy, did not issue tornado warnings. The word tornado had been banned from public forecast in the United States since 1887, and the reason given then and now was always the same. The Bureau was afraid that if they used the word, the public would panic, so the public was told nothing. The villain at the top of this story is not a single man. It is a 66-year policy. In 1887, the US Signal Service, the predecessor to the Weather Bureau, issued an internal directive. Forecasters were forbidden from using the word tornado in any public statement. The reason was written down plainly. The word, the Bureau believed, may cause panic. It was better, in the official judgment of the federal government, that people be killed by storms they didn't see coming, than that people be frightened by storms that didn't arrive. The ban held for 51 years. In 1938, after a wave of deadly tornadoes in the southeast, and the Bureau quietly relaxed the rule. But only internally. Forecasters were now allowed to say tornado in private communications between offices. They were still discouraged, in the strongest possible terms, from saying it to the public. The fear of panic outweighed the fear of dying. By 1953, that policy was still in effect. There had been warnings, lots of them. In March of 1948, 2 Air Force officers at Tinker Field in Oklahoma, Major Ernest Forbush and Captain Robert Miller, had successfully forecast a tornado 5 days in advance. They proved it could be done. The Air Force adopted public tornado warnings the following year. The Weather Bureau did not. In 1949, working meteorologists wrote to Washington begging for a public tornado warning service. They were told the policy would be reviewed. It was not. In 1952, after a tornado outbreak across the South killed more than 200 people in a single night, the Bureau again promised reform. None came. And so on the morning of May 11th, 1953, when the Weather Bureau office in Fort Worth issued its public statement for Central Texas, this is what it said: scattered thunderstorms, locally severe, possibility of hail. The word tornado appeared nowhere. Inside the Bureau's own teletype room, the picture was very different. Forecasters were watching the supercell organise. They could see, on the experimental radar at Texas A&M College, a hooked echo, the radar signature, even then, of a rotating mesocyclone. The signs were there, the forecasters knew. They were told by policy not to tell. The people of Waco, eating lunch, riding the bus, shopping for furniture, had been deliberately, institutionally kept in the dark. By the time they would learn what was coming, they would have less than 90 seconds to react. At 4:10 p.m, a fat black funnel descended out of the supercell, about 10 miles south of Waco, near the town of Lorena. It moved north-northeast at roughly 30 miles per hour, chewing through cotton fields and farm-to-market roads, growing wider with every mile. In Lorena, it killed 2 people in their farmhouse. In the small community of Beverly Hills, just south of the Waco city limits, it lifted barns off their foundations and stripped the bark off the pecan trees. A truck driver hauling oilfield pipe on Highway 77 saw the funnel cross the road in front of him and pulled into a ditch. When he looked up, his trailer was gone and the pipe had been threaded, like grass through a fork, out into the trunks of 3 live oaks 50 yards downwind. By 4:25, the funnel was crossing the southern edge of the city. By 4:30, it was inside it. In downtown Waco, the sky had been darkening for 20 minutes. The air was strange. Thick, green-tinted, completely still. A few people stepped out onto the sidewalk to look up. Most did not. The afternoon Tribune-Herald had not mentioned a tornado. The radio had not mentioned a tornado. The Weather Bureau had not mentioned a tornado. In the basement of the Roosevelt Hotel, an elevator operator heard a sound he later described as like 100 locomotives rolling into a tunnel. He looked at his pocket watch. It read 4:35. In the bell tower of First Baptist Church, the wind suddenly reversed direction. In Cameron Park on the bluff above the river, the leaves on the live oaks began turning silver side up, the old farmer's sign of a coming storm. On the top floor of the 22-story Alico building, the structural engineer on duty felt the entire skyscraper begin to sway under his feet. At Sears Roebuck on 25th Street, Lillie Matkin's switchboard lit up with a single call. She picked up. The voice on the other end was a Waco police dispatcher. He said the words she had never been trained to hear. He said, "Tornado, take cover." She did not have time. The line went dead. At 4:36 p.m, the funnel, now a third of a mile wide, and packing winds of 260 miles per hour, crossed 5th Street and Austin Avenue, the exact centre of downtown Waco. The myth ended in less than 30 seconds. The tornado did not destroy downtown Waco. It detonated it. On Austin Avenue, the 5-story brick wall of the R.T. Dennis & Company furniture store, the largest furniture house in Central Texas, leaned in toward the street. For half a second it seemed to hesitate. Then it gave way. 60,000 bricks, 300 tons of steel beams, 2 complete floors of mahogany dining sets, and brass bed frames pancaked straight down onto the sidewalk, and the cars parked along it. 30 people inside the store were killed in the first second. 11 more were killed in the cars below. The pile was 20 feet high. Across the street, the Roy Huffman drugstore collapsed inward, trapping 14 lunch counter customers in the basement. 3 doors down, Chris's Cafe, where waitresses had been pouring coffee 20 minutes earlier, vanished. Its roof landed 2 blocks away. 6 people died inside. At the Joy Theatre, the matinee was letting out. The marquee tore loose from the building and crashed onto Franklin Avenue, killing a man on the sidewalk below. Inside the lobby, a falling beam killed 2 ushers and a 13-year-old girl on her way home from school. Cars were lifted off the street and thrown through second-story windows. A pickup truck was found wedged into the 3rd floor of the Liberty Building. A city bus was rolled 3 blocks and dropped on its roof. A piano from a music store on 4th Street was carried half a mile and deposited, almost intact, in the front yard of a Baptist parsonage. Letters and bank receipts and family photographs from downtown offices began landing in cotton fields 50 miles to the northeast. Some days later in front yards in Dallas. A cancelled paycheck from a Waco hardware store was found, still legible, 3 counties away. South of downtown, in the working-class neighbourhoods between the rail yards and the river, the funnel chewed through 1 block and skipped the next, the way these storms do. On 11th Street, every house on one side of the street was reduced to a foundation slab. On the other side, the houses still had curtains in the windows. A woman who had been hanging laundry in her backyard was found alive 2 blocks away, still holding the corner of a bedsheet. Her 3 children, who had been playing inside the house, were not. Above all of it, the 22-story Alico building, Waco's pride, the tallest skyscraper for 200 miles, swayed 12 full feet at its top. It did not fall. Its steel frame, designed in 1910 to flex in high wind, unheld. Every other major building on the same block came down. In the rubble of the Sears Roebuck on 25th Street, 24-year-old Lillie Matkin was alive. The collapsed building had crashed down across the switchboard room, where she had been answering calls 30 seconds earlier. A steel beam had pinned her left leg from the knee down. A second beam had stopped, by chance, 6 inches above her chest. She was conscious. Around her in the dark, she could hear other voices. At first many, then fewer, then 1. By the 3rd hour, she could hear nothing at all except the sound of water rising from a broken main. A telephone receiver had landed within reach of her right hand. The line was somehow still live. She picked it up and spoke. A doctor at a Waco hospital across town picked up on the other end. He did not hang up. So for the next 14 hours, he stayed on the line with her, talking, praying, reading aloud from whatever was on his desk, while rescue crews dug toward her voice from above. They reached her at 6:45 the next morning. She lived. 41 others trapped under the same kind of pile on the same downtown blocks did not. By 4:40 p.m, 4 minutes after the funnel crossed Austin Avenue, the tornado was already lifting back into the cloud northeast of the city. The downtown business district, 196 commercial buildings, was simply gone. 2,000 cars were crushed. 150 homes in the residential neighborhood south of downtown had been swept off their foundations. The city's main water main had ruptured. The power was out across all of McLennan County. But the nightmare wasn't over, and it was about to get worse. Within 20 minutes of the tornado lifting, downtown Waco was on fire. Broken gas mains in the rubble had ignited. The fire department's trucks could not reach the blocks they needed to reach. The streets were impassable, choked with brick and steel, and the bodies of the people the city had not been warned about. The water mains were dry. Firefighters watched the rubble pile of the RT Dennis store burn for 6 hours, unable to get water onto it, knowing, and because they could hear them, that people were still alive underneath. It was full dark before the rain came back and put the fires out. When the sun rose over central Texas on the morning of May the 12th, the city of Waco was unrecognizable. The official death toll, when it was finally tallied a week later, was 114, including 27 children under the age of 15. 597 people were injured. More than 1,000 were homeless. Among the dead were entire families. A family of 5 on 11th Street. A mother, a father and 3 daughters had been having an early supper when their house came apart around them. None survived. A young couple and their newborn were found together in the basement of the building, where the husband worked, buried under what had been the 3rd floor. A schoolteacher was identified by her wedding ring. The rest of her was unrecognizable. 2 of her students were never found at all. 12 victims, 6 adults and 6 children, were never identified. They were buried in a single section of Oakwood Cemetery, beneath identical limestone markers, on each engraved only with the date, May 11th, 1953. The American Red Cross arrived from Dallas within 4 hours of the storm. The Texas National Guard was mobilized by midnight. President Dwight Eisenhower declared a federal disaster the next morning, the first such declaration ever issued for a tornado. Volunteers from Baylor University and from churches across central Texas worked the rubble piles for 9 straight days, pulling out survivors at first, then bodies, then pieces. Air Force men from nearby Connolly Field arrived with floodlights and rigged them on the rim of the RT Dennis pile so the digging could continue through the night. Local farmers brought in mules and pulled brick out by the wagon load. A field hospital was set up in the Baylor Gymnasium. When every funeral home in McLennan County ran out of caskets by the end of the 2nd day, the last confirmed body was recovered from the RT Dennis pile on May 20th, 9 days after the storm. The bill for the destruction came to $41 million in 1953 money, the equivalent of nearly $500 million today. Insurance covered a fraction. Most of downtown Waco was uninsured because everyone had always known, that tornadoes could not strike Waco. The survivors wanted to know one thing: why had no one warned them? Nobody was held accountable. There was no lawsuit because there was no legal target. The Weather Bureau was a federal agency, immune from suit. RT Dennis & Company was bankrupted by the storm itself. The buildings that had pancaked downtown had been built to the codes of their day, decades earlier. The myth that Waco was protected from tornadoes, repeated by realtors and newspaper editors and Chamber of Commerce pamphlets for nearly a century, had no author and no defendant. The people who had told the story were the people who were buried under it. But the storm did force a change. 3 weeks after the funeral processions ended, the US Weather Bureau quietly issued a new internal memo. The word tornado was, effective immediately, no longer discouraged in public forecasts. Within a year, the Bureau had launched the first national public tornado warning service in American history. By 1957, the WSR-57 weather radar, the prototype of the system that today scans every county in the United States, was being installed in offices across the South and the Midwest. Every tornado warning issued in the United States since 1953, every siren, every interrupted television broadcast, every push notification on a phone, traces its lineage back to one Monday afternoon in central Texas. The death toll of every tornado that has struck the United States since 1953 has, on average, fallen by more than half. The science changed because Waco died. Today, if you stand at the corner of 5th Street and Austin Avenue, you will see a small bronze plaque set into the sidewalk. It is easy to miss. Above you, 22 stories tall, the Alico building, the only major downtown structure that survived, still stands. It is still the tallest building in Waco. It still flexes in a high wind, exactly the way its 1910 engineers designed it to. The 1953 Waco tornado was not, in the end, an unstoppable act of God, and nature provided the wind, but 66 years of federal silence, a century of civic myth, And one cheap belief that some places are special, those provided the body count. 114 dead, 12 never named, 0 people held accountable. Remember Waco.